Commercial aviation depends on one silent agreement, that the sky remains predictable. But predictability collapses the moment fighter jets enter civilian airspace. During recent US-Venezuela airspace tension, military aircraft began operating near routes used by passenger flights. For the people inside those cabins, nothing felt different. For the aviation system responsible for their safety, everything changed. That trust begins to erode the moment military aircraft enter civilian airspace under heightened tension. In recent months, airspace over and around Venezuela has drawn international attention after reports of United States military helicopters and fighter jets operating in proximity to civilian flight corridors. While headlines focused on politics, aviation professionals saw something far more concerning: the sudden transformation of controlled airspace into a zone of elevated risk. Airspace is not simply empty sky. It is a structured, layered environment governed by international agreements, radar surveillance, and strict communication protocols. Commercial aircraft fly along designated airways at specific altitudes, timed precisely to avoid conflicts. When military aircraft operate within or near these corridors, the entire system must adapt instantly. Fighter jets and military helicopters behave very differently from commercial airliners. They fly faster, climb aggressively, descend rapidly, and may operate without standard civilian transponders fully active. These differences alone introduce complexity, but during periods of political or military tension, the risks increase dramatically. The situation involving the United States and Venezuela highlights how quickly civilian aviation can be affected by geopolitical events. Military flights are often classified, their routes undisclosed, and their objectives unrelated to civilian traffic flow. When such aircraft operate near busy airspace, air traffic controllers are forced to reroute commercial flights, impose altitude restrictions, or close sections of airspace altogether. Each decision must be made in real time, often with limited information. For pilots flying passenger jets, these changes arrive as sudden instructions: turn immediately, climb or descend, hold position, or divert to an alternate airport. Passengers rarely realize what is happening. Inside the cabin, a diversion feels like a delay or an inconvenience. Outside the aircraft, it may be a carefully calculated maneuver designed to keep a civilian jet separated from a high-speed military aircraft operating under entirely different rules. History has shown that confusion in such environments can have tragic consequences. Aviation accidents linked to military activity have often stemmed from miscommunication, misidentification, or incomplete situational awareness. In the case of US-Venezuela airspace tension, the concern was not an isolated flight or a single incident. It was the broader pattern of increased military presence in a region where commercial aviation normally expects stability. Venezuela sits beneath important regional air routes used by international carriers connecting North America, South America, and the Caribbean. Any disruption in this area forces airlines to make costly and complex decisions, including longer routes, higher fuel consumption, and increased crew workload. From an aviation safety perspective, the presence of fighter jets in civilian skies changes the risk profile instantly. Fighter aircraft are designed for combat effectiveness, not passenger comfort or predictable routing. Their radar systems, maneuvering capabilities, and mission priorities differ fundamentally from those of commercial aircraft. While military pilots are highly trained, their objectives may require rapid changes in speed or direction that civilian traffic cannot easily anticipate. Another critical factor is identification. In tense airspace, radar operators must quickly and accurately distinguish between friendly military aircraft, civilian flights, and unidentified targets. A simple error in identification can escalate rapidly. For civilian pilots, maintaining constant communication with air traffic control becomes essential. Yet communication channels can become saturated during high traffic or high alert situations. This is why aviation authorities worldwide treat any military escalation near civilian airspace with extreme caution. The goal is not to assign blame or interpret political motives, but to preserve the integrity of the global aviation system. When the skies become unpredictable, even briefly, the margin for error narrows. The US-Venezuela situation serves as a reminder that aviation safety does not exist in isolation. It is deeply connected to global stability, international coordination, and disciplined airspace management. When fighter jets enter civilian skies, the consequences extend far beyond military objectives. They reach into the cockpit of every passenger aircraft flying nearby, testing the resilience of a system built on order, communication, and trust. When military aircraft begin operating near civilian airspace, the first visible change is rarely dramatic. There are no explosions, no alarms inside passenger cabins, and no immediate sense of danger for travelers on board commercial flights. Instead, the shift occurs quietly within the global air traffic management system. Radar screens grow more complex, communication becomes more frequent, and margins that are normally generous begin to narrow. During periods of US-Venezuela airspace tension, this silent transformation was the primary concern for aviation authorities rather than any single military maneuver. Air traffic control exists to maintain separation, predictability, and order. Civilian aircraft follow standardized procedures, flight plans, and altitude assignments that allow controllers to anticipate their movements minutes or even hours in advance. Military aircraft, however, may not always adhere to these same patterns. Fighter jets can change speed and direction rapidly. Helicopters may operate at unconventional altitudes, and mission priorities can override routine traffic flow. When these two systems intersect, coordination becomes critical. One of the first measures taken during heightened airspace tension is the creation or expansion of restricted zones. These zones are designed to keep civilian aircraft away from areas of military activity. While effective in principle, restricted airspace creates secondary effects across the aviation network. Flights that would normally pass through a region must be rerouted, sometimes hundreds of kilometers off their original path. These diversions increase flight time, fuel consumption, and pilot workload, all while placing additional pressure on neighboring airspace sectors. For pilots, the operational environment changes immediately. Instead of following a stable, pre-planned route, crews must remain prepared for sudden instructions. Air traffic controllers may issue unexpected altitude changes, speed adjustments, or heading deviations with little notice. Each instruction must be acknowledged, understood, and executed precisely. In busy airspace, this rapid exchange of information increases the risk of miscommunication, especially when multiple aircraft are affected simultaneously. Another critical issue during military activity near civilian skies is radar identification. Civilian aircraft are easily identifiable through standardized transponder signals that broadcast position, altitude, and identity. Military aircraft may limit or modify these signals depending on operational requirements. This creates challenges for both civilian controllers and onboard collision avoidance systems. While safeguards exist, any reduction in shared situational awareness increases complexity. The US-Venezuela airspace situation also highlighted the role of international coordination. Airspace does not exist in isolation within national borders. Decisions made in one region can affect traffic flows across an entire continent. Airlines operating long-haul routes must evaluate whether to continue using certain corridors or avoid them entirely. These decisions are based on risk assessments, insurance considerations, and guidance from aviation authorities. Even a temporary increase in military activity can lead to long-term route changes. From a safety standpoint, none of these measures imply immediate danger. Modern aviation systems are designed with redundancy and resilience. However, safety is not defined by the absence of accidents alone. It is measured by the system's ability to manage risk before it escalates. Military aircraft operating near civilian routes increase workload for everyone involved, from controllers and pilots to dispatchers and safety analysts monitoring the situation in real time. Historical precedent reinforces this cautious approach. Past incidents involving civilian aircraft in militarized airspace have often been traced back to confusion rather than intent. Misidentification, delayed communication, or incomplete information can combine in unpredictable ways. This is why aviation authorities emphasize prevention over reaction, preferring diversions and restrictions even when no direct threat is evident. Passengers remain largely unaware of these dynamics. A delayed arrival, an unexpected refueling stop, or a longer flight time is rarely associated with military activity in the skies below. Yet these inconveniences often reflect a deliberate effort to maintain safety margins. The absence of visible drama is not a sign that nothing is happening, but rather evidence that the system is working as intended. The presence of fighter jets in or near civilian airspace changes the operational landscape in subtle but significant ways. It transforms routine flights into complex coordination, exercises, and tests the adaptability of global aviation infrastructure. The US-Venezuela airspace tension serves as a case study in how quickly normal skies can require extraordinary management, even when no shots are fired and no incidents occur. In aviation, the most dangerous situations are not always the loudest or most visible. They are often defined by uncertainty, incomplete information, and decisions made under pressure. When military aircraft operate near civilian airspace, these conditions emerge almost immediately. The concern is not that fighter jets are inherently unsafe, but that civilian and military aviation operate under fundamentally different assumptions. History has shown that when those assumptions collide, the results can be catastrophic. Misidentification remains one of the most serious risks in tense airspace. Civilian aircraft follow predictable flight paths, broadcast identification continuously, and communicate openly with air traffic control. Military aircraft, depending on mission requirements, may restrict information flow or operate under heightened alert conditions. In such environments, radar operators and pilots must make rapid judgments based on limited data. Even a small delay or misunderstanding can escalate into a serious incident. Aviation history offers sobering examples. Several past tragedies occurred not because systems failed outright, but because individuals interpreted ambiguous information incorrectly. In militarized airspace, radar signals can overlap, communication channels may become congested, and assumptions can replace confirmation. Civilian pilots may be unaware of nearby military activity until the final moments, while military crews may encounter unexpected civilian traffic in areas they believed were secure. The presence of fighter jets introduces another layer of complexity: speed differentials. Commercial airliners operate at stable cruise speeds designed for efficiency and comfort. Fighter aircraft are capable of extreme acceleration, rapid climbs, and aggressive maneuvers. Even when separation standards are maintained, the closing speed between aircraft can reduce reaction time dramatically. Collision avoidance systems are effective, but they rely on accurate and timely data from all aircraft involved. During periods of US-Venezuela airspace tension, aviation authorities focused on preventing precisely these scenarios. The goal was to eliminate ambiguity before it could develop. This meant rerouting flights well away from military activity, even if no direct threat was identified. From the outside, these measures may appear excessive. From inside the aviation safety community, they represent standard risk management. Another concern lies in command structure. Civil aviation operates under a clear hierarchy of air traffic control authority, standardized phraseology, and international procedures. Military aviation follows a different chain of command, where operational objectives may supersede routine coordination. When these two systems intersect, clarity becomes essential. Any uncertainty about who controls a given section of airspace increases risk. Weather and terrain further complicate the picture. Over regions like northern South America and the Caribbean, rapidly changing weather patterns can force both civilian and military aircraft to adjust routes unexpectedly. In normal conditions, such deviations are manageable. In tense airspace, they introduce additional unpredictability. A civilian aircraft deviating for weather may unintentionally approach an area of military sensitivity, triggering defensive responses. Aviation professionals are trained to anticipate these scenarios, but training does not eliminate risk entirely. Instead, it reduces the likelihood that errors will align. This concept, often described as layered defense, is central to aviation safety. When military aircraft enter civilian skies, some of those layers are strained. Communication becomes more complex, decision timelines shorten, and reliance on judgment increases. Passengers rarely perceive these risks because aviation systems are designed to shield them from uncertainty. A smooth flight experience does not mean conditions outside the aircraft are equally calm. In many cases, the absence of visible disruption is the result of deliberate, conservative decision-making. Flights are delayed, rerouted, or canceled not because danger is imminent, but because professionals refuse to allow uncertainty to grow unchecked. The US-Venezuela airspace tension illustrates why aviation safety is inseparable from global stability. Even limited military activity can ripple outward, affecting routes, schedules, and operational planning far beyond the immediate region. Airlines, regulators, and controllers must constantly evaluate whether the margin for error remains acceptable. Ultimately, the greatest risk in these situations is not confrontation, but confusion. History has shown that confusion, once introduced into the aviation system, can persist long enough to create irreversible outcomes. This is why aviation authorities treat any overlap between military operations and civilian airspace with caution bordering on intolerance. When fighter jets enter civilian skies, the system responds not with alarm but with restraint. Routes are adjusted, information is filtered carefully, and safety margins are widened wherever possible. These actions reflect decades of lessons learned the hard way. The absence of disaster is not accidental. It is the product of vigilance, discipline, and a deep respect for how fragile predictability can be when the skies grow uncertain. At the center of every aviation decision lies a human element that rarely appears in headlines. While systems, procedures, and technology form the backbone of air safety, it is people who ultimately interpret information and act under pressure. When fighter jets enter civilian skies, the strain placed on those individuals increases, even if passengers never notice. Pilots, air traffic controllers, dispatchers, and safety managers become the final barrier between uncertainty and catastrophe. For airline pilots, heightened airspace tension changes the mental environment of flight. Even when operating far from visible military activity, crews are briefed on potential disruptions, reroutes, and communication irregularities. This awareness demands constant vigilance. Pilots must monitor instructions carefully, cross-check navigation data, and remain prepared for sudden changes. The workload may not be visible, but it is real, accumulating quietly over long hours at cruise altitude. Air traffic controllers experience a different kind of pressure. Their responsibility is not limited to a single aircraft, but extends across an entire sector of airspace. During periods of military activity, controllers must integrate incomplete or rapidly changing information into their decision-making. They coordinate with military authorities, neighboring control centers, and airline operations simultaneously. Each instruction they issue must maintain safe separation while accounting for aircraft with very different performance capabilities. Behind the scenes, airline dispatchers and safety teams play a critical role. They monitor global events continuously, assessing whether planned routes remain acceptable. In situations like the US-Venezuela airspace tension, these teams analyze intelligence reports, regulatory advisories, and operational data to determine risk levels. Decisions to reroute or cancel flights are rarely taken lightly. They involve cost, passenger disruption, and logistical complexity, but safety remains the overriding factor. For passengers, the experience remains largely unchanged. A seatbelt sign, a brief announcement, or an extended flight time rarely conveys the full context of what is happening beyond the windows. This separation is intentional. Aviation is designed to insulate travelers from uncertainty, not expose them to it. Calm cabins are not the result of ignorance, but of systems working to keep risk distant and controlled. The long-term impact of military activity near civilian airspace extends beyond any single incident. Airlines may permanently alter routes, avoiding regions that have demonstrated volatility. These changes affect flight durations, fuel planning, and even ticket pricing. Over time, patterns emerge, reshaping the global aviation map in subtle but lasting ways. Regions once considered routine may become less frequented, while alternative corridors grow more congested. Regulatory bodies also respond to such events by refining procedures and guidance. Lessons learned from periods of tension inform future policy, training, and coordination protocols. The goal is not to react emotionally, but to strengthen resilience. Aviation safety evolves through experience, often driven by scenarios that never make headlines precisely because disaster was avoided. The US-Venezuela airspace situation underscores a broader truth about modern aviation. The sky is no longer just a domain of travel. It is a shared space influenced by political, military, and economic forces. Civil aviation must coexist with these realities, while preserving its foundational promise of safety. That coexistence requires constant negotiation, discipline, and respect for boundaries that are sometimes invisible. One of the most important safeguards in this environment is transparency among aviation stakeholders. Clear communication between civil and military authorities reduces ambiguity. International cooperation ensures that decisions made in one region do not inadvertently increase risk elsewhere. When these relationships function well, tension can be managed without compromising safety. Ultimately, the presence of fighter jets in civilian skies is not inherently a failure of the system. It is a test of that system's ability to adapt without losing control. Aviation has faced such tests before and has evolved through them. Each period of uncertainty reinforces the importance of predictability, coordination, and conservative decision-making. As this series has shown, the greatest dangers in aviation rarely announce themselves dramatically. They emerge quietly through complexity and uncertainty. The response, equally quiet, is built on preparation and restraint. When flights arrive safely despite unseen challenges, it is evidence of a system that values prevention over reaction. When fighter jets enter civilian skies, the story is not one of confrontation, but of management. It is a reminder that safety is not static, but actively maintained every day by people who understand what is at stake. The calm experienced by passengers is earned through vigilance elsewhere, and as long as aviation continues to respect the fragile balance of shared airspace, that calm can endure even when the skies grow tense.